Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is Aiman Nazir and welcome to Knowledge Realm. Students, today we're going to cover a very important topic of International Relations Part 1. We're going to study nation-state system and the challenges to this system in the contemporary world. Students, this is a very important topic from paper's point of view, so stay focused and let's get started. Starting with a brief introduction of nation-state system. Students, if I define this system in the most simple terms, I would say that this is the system that we are living in today. This is the system that is established in the world today. What does it mean by nation-state system? It means simply that almost every nation in the world has its own separate state today. If we look at the globe today, we would see that the entire globe is divided in small territories, and these small territories are called state, and these states are for their respective nation. For example, China is a state, and this state is for the people of China. The people of China are a nation, and they have their state demarcated by defined boundaries. This is the border of China, and the territory of China is for the people of China, the nation China. Then we have Russia. People of Russia are the nation of Russia, and this is the state of Russia. Then we have India. So the entire globe is divided into small territories, and these territories are called states, and every state belongs to a nation, a separate nation. So this is the nation-state system that works in the world today. Students, the system came into being after Treaty of Westphalia in 1648 in Europe. The system was started from Europe. Europe was the first region of the world that designed this system. Then students, after World War II, this system was globalized. If we see today, entire globe is divided into small territories, and these territories are called state. So we can say that yes, now nation-state system has been globalized. The entire globe is divided into small territories, and this system, nation-state system, encompasses the entire globe now. But students, today this system in 21st century is subjected to many challenges. There are many challenges to this system. The value of a state is diminishing, and today the most important actor in the world is not the state, but it's the human. Today we talk about human, the international law talks about human. The state is losing its value, and the value of human is increased today. We will discuss this in the future, and I'll try to explain it in the most simple manner. Now here I would like to break down this term nation-state system and explain this system in detail. Students, this term nation-state system, the whole phrase comprises of two main terms, that is nation and then state. So let's see what is nation first. And what is the difference between nation and state? Students, nation is actually a social identity. A nation is a group of people who share a set of characteristics. Now, what is this set of characteristics? This is ethnicity, this is language, this is cultural identity, and then history. If there's a group of people who shares this set of characteristics, then we can say that yes, this group of people is a nation. For example, Pakistani. We all know that our ethnicity is same, our language is Urdu, the national language of the country Pakistan is Urdu. Then our cultural identity is same. We derive our culture from the religion Islam. Then our history is same. We used to live in subcontinent together, and then India and Pakistan got partitioned. So our history, the people of Pakistan, their history is same, their language is same, their cultural identity is same, and their ethnicity is same. These people share a set of characteristics, so yes, we can say that the people of Pakistan are a nation. and we call the people of Pakistan collectively Pakistani. Then another example, the people of India. The people of India are also a nation. They have same ethnicity, same language. Their language is Hindi. Cultural identity, their cultural identity is Hinduism. They derive their culture from Hinduism. Then they have same history. So yes, we can say that Indian people are also a nation. Then China, then USA, all these. This is the definition of a nation. Now let's define what is a state. It is very easy to understand. Students, state is actually a political identity. Nation is a social identity and state is a political identity. Our state has 4 fundamental characteristics, which are territorial base, stable population, government to rule this population, and sovereignty of the government internally and externally also. If a region of the world, an area of the world has these 4 fundamental characteristics, that if a region of the world has a territorial base that is demarcated by defined borders, a state must have defined borders. If an area has a territorial base and this territory is demarcated by defined borders, and inside the borders there is a stable population that belongs to this state, and to rule that population there is a government, and the government is sovereign inside and outside the border also. All the other states of the world recognize this government as a sovereign government, and the people of that state inside the territory of that state also recognize that government as the sovereign of that state. Then yes, we can say that this is a state. I'm repeating that a state must have 4 fundamental characteristics. It should have a territory, a defined territory, and the territory must be demarcated by a defined borders, then a stable population, then government to rule this population, and then sovereignty of the government. If the region has these 4 fundamental characteristics, then we can say that yes, this is a state. For example, Pakistan. Here I have attached a map of Pakistan. This is the territory of Pakistan, students, and these are the borders of Pakistan, defined borders. And inside these borders, the territory belongs to Pakistan state. This is the territory. And inside the borders, the people of Pakistan live. And these people are the population of Pakistan, and there is definitely a government to rule this population, and the government is sovereign inside and outside the territory also. So this is the nation and state, the difference between nation and the state. Now students, if we combine these 2 terms, what do we get? We will get a definition of nation-state system. Nation-state system is a system in which single or multiple nationalities join together in a formal political union. Now, what is a formal political union? The formal political union is the state. If single or multiple nationalities join together and they join in a formal political union, then we say that yes, this is a nation-state system. So this is the whole explanation of nation-state system. I've given the examples also. Pakistanis are a nation. They live in the state Pakistan. So Pakistan is a state. I hope that it makes sense and it is clear now. Now students, we're going to start the origin of nation-state system. How this system started and from where this system started, and what were the events that led to the formation of this nation-state system. So students, starting with the 30 Years' War of Europe, students, this war was started in 1618 and it ended in 1648. This was a war in Central Europe actually. Well, there were many conflicts that led to the initiation of this war, but we would focus on one conflict only, that was related to the religious authority of Pope. Well, actually students, there were 2 parties of the war. The belligerents were Protestants and Catholics. Protestants and Catholics were fighting, and Protestants wanted the abolishment of the authority of Pope on all the countries of all the states of Central Europe. Protestants were of the view that the authority of Pope, the political authority of Pope on all these countries is not legitimate, and we want freedom from the Roman Church, we want freedom from the Pope, and we want to rule our country ourselves. We do not want the authority of Pope on our countries. So this was the main religious conflict of 30 Years' War that started in 1618 and ended in 1648. Well, the war ended in 1648, and it ended with the clear victory of Protestants. Protestants won the war. Then, students, various peace agreements were signed between Protestants and Catholics. And these peace agreements were called Peace of Westphalia or Treaty of Westphalia. It was signed in 1648 AD. As a result of this treaty, the authority of Catholic Church was abolished in 1648 from many countries of Europe. Then, students, the system of monarchy was started, and the monarch of these countries were made the sovereign of these countries. Each country was given a separate monarch. And it was decided that, okay, now from here on, the monarch will be the sovereign of the state instead of the Pope and the Catholic Church. Two main principles that were adopted after this were sovereignty and non-intervention. It was decided that from here on, every state will be sovereign, and we would observe a principle of non-intervention. No state can intervene in the domestic matters of any other state. So this was the origin of nation-state system in 1648 in Europe as a result of the Peace of Westphalia. Okay, students, so here are the principles of Treaty of Westphalia. These principles were written in the Treaty of Westphalia, and I would explain these principles in detail, and I would like to mention one thing here, that students, these principles are also the basis of the United Nations Charter that we follow today. The United Nations Charter is also written on these principles. So starting with the first principle, territorial integrity of a state. It was written in the Treaty of Westphalia that the state will enjoy territorial integrity. A state has legal right on its territory, and the territory of a state cannot be invaded by another state. And students, this same thing is mentioned in the United Charter also. Article 2.4 of the Charter of the United Nations states that all members of the United Nations, which are the states, shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. So this same thing is mentioned in the United Nations. And from where did United Nations get this? It was from Treaty of Westphalia. Today, all the states in the world enjoy territorial integrity. But students, these principles and these things are not followed or practiced in a very strict manner. And I would explain this in the future, that how these principles and how this nation-state system is being challenged in 21st century. Then the second principle of Treaty of Westphalia, the external sovereignty of a state. Students, it was written in the Treaty of Westphalia that a state would be a sovereign entity in the world, and no state would have the right to challenge the sovereignty of a state, and all these states would recognize each other as a sovereign entity. It says all the states of international society would recognize a state as a sovereign entity of the territory that is bounded by its borders. Then the state can pursue political policies in international society. The state can pursue whatever political policy it likes in international society, and it cannot be forced by any other state by any means. The state could make any goals in the international arena and can do efforts to achieve those goals. For example, the state can make relations with any state that it wants. For example, today Pakistan can make relations with Russia. India cannot prevent Pakistan from making relations with Russia. Then Pakistan can make relations with Afghanistan, and US does not have the legal right to stop Pakistan from making relations with Afghanistan. Then Pakistan can make relations with India, it can make relations with US, it can make relations with any state that it wants, and no one can stop it from doing so because Pakistan is a sovereign entity on the map of the world. But students, unfortunately, things have changed and these things are not practiced in the most strict manner. This is another challenge to the nation-state system today. Then the third principle of Treaty of Westphalia, this is non-intervention by other states. No state or any governmental organization, international governmental organization, can interfere in the domestic affairs of a sovereign state. The state is sovereign, and this is one of the basic principles of the Treaty of Westphalia, that intervention is not allowed. States cannot interfere in the domestic affairs of a sovereign state. And students, this same thing is the Article 2.7 of the United Nations Charter. The Article 2.7 says that the United Nations has no authority to intervene in matters which are within the domestic jurisdiction of any state. So here you can see that no state or international governmental organization can interfere in the domestic affairs of a sovereign state. Then the fourth principle, it is the equality in the international society. All these sovereign states are equal in the international society, irrespective of their area, irrespective of their economy, irrespective of their population, their size, their military strength, age of the state, and all other elements. All these states are a member of international society, a sovereign member of international society, and all the states are equal politically in international society. Then the fifth principle, it is the political and social equality of individuals inside a state. People living inside a state will be socially and politically equal, irrespective of their social or financial strength or whatever elements there are. The people are equal. Then the sixth principle of Treaty of Westphalia, it is the internal sovereignty of a state. People living in a state will recognize the legitimate government of the state as the sovereign. This is the last principle of Treaty of Westphalia, and I hope that all these principles are clear now. And students, today these principles form the foundation of the United Nations Charter. The United Nations Charter was written on these principles, and the base of the charter is actually these principles of Treaty of Westphalia. So students, alhamdulillah, we are done with the origin of nation-state system and the principles of Treaty of Westphalia in detail. We have studied these things in detail. Now we will study the expansion of nation-state system. How this system expanded and how this system encompassed the entire globe. We all know that the system started with Europe in 1648. The Central Europe overthrew the authority of Pope, and it established a system that was called nation-state system. Today, students, the nation-state system encompasses the entire globe. We would study 4 stages of expansion of nation-state system. First, we're going to study independence of USA in 18th century, then incorporation of non-colonized countries, then decolonization after Second World War, and then disintegration of Soviet Union in 1989. Starting with the first stage of the expansion of nation-state system, the independence of USA from British in 18th century. Students, we all know that from 1500 AD to 1900 AD, Europe colonized the entire world. The imperial powers of Europe, that is France, Britain, Spain, these imperial powers colonized different pieces of lands in Asia and Africa. Almost entire world was colonized by these imperial powers. USA was one of them. USA was also a colony of British and France. We would study this thing in the history of USA. Inshallah, I would start that course also. So we would study the colonization of USA in that course in detail. So USA was also a colony of British, Spain, and France. All these imperial powers divided the Western Hemisphere among themselves. This right here is the map, and these were the 13 colonies of British Empire: Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, and these were the colonies. So students, in 1776, USA got independent from British. USA started its revolution and USA won independence. USA established its sovereign government then. Students, it took the nation-state system to the Western Hemisphere of the world, because we all know that America is in the West, and after this the USA was established. USA was created by the founding fathers of USA. George Washington and John Adams established the first government of US, and it was the expansion of nation-state system to the Western Hemisphere of the world. The independence of USA took the nation-state system to the Western Hemisphere of the world. Then students, in 18th and 19th century, the countries or the pieces of land that could not be colonized by the imperial power were also incorporated in this system, the system of nation-state system. The countries which could not be colonized by European nations were accepted as sovereign states by the European nations, and these countries were Turkey, Japan, and China. These countries were non-colonized, and British or any other imperial power could not succeed in colonizing these countries. So these countries were accepted as a sovereign state by Europe. Turkey was accepted as sovereign state by Europe as a result of Treaty of Paris in 1856, and Japan was also accepted as a sovereign state. Students, Japan was the country that strengthened very rapidly, that grew very rapidly. Japan acquired the constitutional shape of a modern state in early 19th century. So these were the first two stages of the expansion of nation-state system. Now the third stage of the expansion of nation-state system, which is the decolonization after Second World War in 1945. Students, we all know that before 1945, there were many parts of the world that were colonized by the imperial powers of Europe, and mostly by British imperial power. India was colonized, Africa was colonized by Portugal, France, Great Britain. Here I have added a very interesting map. All the yellow territories were, this right here, were colonized by Britain. All the green were colonized by France. So students, after World War II, a wave of decolonization started. The political people of these lands, the indigenous people, political people, started political movements, and people started chanting the slogan of right of self-determination. Then students, after World War II, colonies in Asia and Africa became independent, and numerous new states emerged on the map of the world. For example, India and Pakistan. Pakistan got independent in 1947. India also. Then there is Bangladesh. Then many other states in Africa also. All these states got independent from their colonizers. So students, this expanded nation-state system and many new states emerged on the map of the world. Then the last stage of the expansion of nation-state system was the disintegration of Soviet Union in 1989. This was the final stage of the globalization of nation-state system. Students, after this, we can say that the nation-state system was globalized and it encompassed the entire globe. And now we see that this is the system, that is nation-state system, that works in the entire world. Final stage of the globalization of nation-state system was disintegration of Soviet Union in 1989. 15 states got independence from Soviet Union as a result of this disintegration. So students, this is the completion of expansion of nation-state system. Now this system encompasses the entire globe and this system is globalized now. So students, here is the most interesting and comprehensive slide of this lecture today. It is the summary of today's lecture. So let's start the revision of whatever we have studied till this slide. Students, all this started in 1618. In 1618, a war started in Central Europe, which is called 30 Years' War. There were two parties and there were many conflicts, and one of the conflict was the conflict of religion. One of the party was Protestant and the other party was Catholics. Protestant, the main question of conflict was the religious authority of Pope on the political system of the countries of Central Europe. Protestants wanted abolishment of the authority of Pope, and Catholics, they wanted continuation of the authority of Pope and allegiance to the Catholic Church. This was the thing, this was the conflict that started a long 30 years war in Central Europe. Then students, in 1648, this war ended with the Treaty of Westphalia, or we can say with the Peace of Westphalia. Protestants won the war, and as a result of this war and the treaty, authority of Pope was established from Central Europe. Then students, this was the beginning of nation-state system. This was the origin of nation-state system in Central Europe, 1648. There were some principles that were written in the Treaty of Westphalia. First of all, it was the territorial integrity of the state, then sovereignty of the states internally and externally also, then non-intervention in domestic affairs of the state. Then equality in the international society of the states, political equality of the states, then equality of individuals inside a state. So these were the major principles that were written in the Treaty of Westphalia. Then students, we studied the expansion of nation-state system in the world. How did it started and how did it end? So the first stage of the expansion of nation-state system was the independence of US in 1776, when the system was taken to the Western Hemisphere of the world. Then incorporation of non-colonized countries that we just studied. Then decolonization after World War II in 1945. Then disintegration of Soviet Union in 1989. So this was the summary, or this was a revision of whatever we have studied today. And I hope that all this is making sense and it is very clear now. And I hope that such kind of diagrams would help you in memorization of the topic also. Students, we are done with the nation-state system, how it started, from where it started, and how it expanded. The history of nation-state system, we have studied everything. Now we would study the challenges to this system in this century. We all know that today nation-state system is facing severe challenges in 21st century. So now we're going to study what are these challenges. First of all, student, globalization, that is the order of the day, is challenging nation-state system. Globalization is bringing a new cosmopolitan culture and it is eroding the national identities of people that was the foundation of nation-state system. Students, do you people remember what was the foundation of nation-state system? It was the nationalism. It was the national identity of people. For example, the country of Pakistan. Pakistan exists because Pakistani exist. The people of Pakistan exist. The nation Pakistan exists. Pakistan would stop its existence if the people of Pakistan stop recognizing themselves as Pakistani. So today, students, this globalization, which is the order of the day, this is challenging the nation-state system in this manner that it is eroding the national identities of people. And the national identities of people, this was the foundation of nation-state system. And how it is eroding the national identity of people. For example, students, we all know that today people are moving from one country to another. For example, Pakistanis are moving from Pakistan to US, they are moving from Pakistan to China, they are moving from Pakistan to England, and they are moving permanently. They move to the developed world and they start living there, they start their life there, and they do not intend to come back to their countries. So when a person moves from its country to another country, it starts embracing everything of the foreign country. Then it starts its family there, its life there, and it forgets that from where I've come from. This is what's happening in the world today. If you go to US, you would find there that there are Africans, there are Asians, there are Americans, and these people are forgetting their national identities. So globalization is bringing a new cosmopolitan culture. This is the cosmopolitan culture. If you see here in this picture that I've attached, this picture is from one of the city of US. This lady is black, this lady is white, this lady is blonde, this lady is brunette. This person I do not know, but it seems like that this is Asian, and I do not know from where this person is, but this is a cosmopolitan culture, that people are getting united in each other's states, and this thing is eroding the national identity of the people. So this is how the globalization is challenging nation-state system. Then another thing, global financial markets limit the states' freedom to control their economic policies. We all know that today there is a model of economic liberalism that is dominated in the world, and countries practice trade among themselves, and global financial markets limit the states' freedom to control their economic policies, because we cannot control the prices of the foreign markets. We cannot dictate US on what price it sells its armaments or its goods, import and export of goods among states. This is the thing that is controlling the state's freedom to control its economic policies. This is globalization. This is the economic globalization, that countries are doing trade among themselves. Then another challenge, international financial institutions are challenging nation-state system. International financial institutions limit the state's freedom to control their economic policies. For example, IMF. We all know that IMF is an international financial institution that issues loan to the countries that are in problem. For example, Pakistan, IMF gives loan to Pakistan, and in return of this loan, it poses some restrictions on Pakistan, and the restrictions are called structural adjustments programs of IMF. So this is how IMF is dictating the economic policies to Pakistan. This is how this IMF is controlling the economic freedom of Pakistan. This is a challenge to a nation-state system. This is a challenge to a state, because in the principles of Treaty of Westphalia, we studied that states are sovereign entities and states are free to do whatever they want. States are free to rule the territory that is bounded by the defined borders. This is one of the principles of Treaty of Westphalia, but today this principle is being challenged by the modern order of the world, the economic order of the world, the economic liberalism. Then students, international law. International law is also challenging nation-state system. The sovereignty of state is being violated. How? Students, today International law gives more value to human rights than the rights of the states. International law is intervening in the domestic affairs of a state. Now here we are not going to discuss that if it's right, if it's justified or not, if it's right or wrong. We're not going to discuss this thing here, but the only thing that we're going to discuss is the violation of the principles of Treaty of Westphalia. There is a new concept that is called, students, humanitarian intervention. Today, the most important and most valuable thing in the world is human and human rights, and not the rights of states. So today, students, the international forces, for example, NATO, the United Nations, these forces and these non-state actors do humanitarian intervention. If these organizations notice or gets the report of human right violation, these forces intervene in the states. For example, the invasion of Iraq in 2003 by NATO forces. US got the news of human rights violation in Iraq, so US and NATO forces invaded Iraq in 2003. This was the violation of the principle of Treaty of Westphalia. But US invaded, and this is the violation of sovereignty of a state. This is the violation of principle of non-intervention. States are not allowed to intervene in the domestic affairs of another state. But in 2003, Iraq was invaded. Then in 2001, Afghanistan was invaded. And in 2011, Libya was invaded. So this is how the international law is challenging the sovereignty of a state. Then, students, today non-state actors are strengthened a lot, and these actors are intervening in the domestic affairs of a state actor. For example, United Nations, which is a non-state actor, it intervenes in the domestic affairs of a state. For example, in 2003, it intervened in the domestic affairs of Iraq, and then it intervened in the domestic affairs of Libya. So this is how non-state actors are intervening in the domestic affairs of a state actor. Then, students, terrorist organizations. These organizations are also violating the sovereignty of a state. For example, in 2001, the Al-Qaeda violated the sovereignty of Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda launched attack on the two most important buildings of US, that is World Trade Center and the Pentagon, from the lands of Afghanistan. This was the violation of the sovereignty of Afghanistan. The Al-Qaeda got control of Afghanistan and it made Afghanistan its own land, which was, Al-Qaeda was a terrorist organization, but it violated the sovereignty of Afghanistan. Then, students, MNCs. MNCs means multinational corporations. These multinational corporations are also violating the sovereignty of a state actor. For example, all the products like all the textile industry, the footwear industry and the food industry, for example, McDonald's, KFC, Nike, Gucci, and then all these industries violate the sovereignty of a state actor. How? Because these are the industries that decide on what prices they're going to sell their products in a country, and the state cannot stop these multinational corporations from doing so. We cannot dictate, for example, Pakistan cannot dictate Apple to decide its prices in Pakistan. Apple is independent in this matter. Apple is free in this matter, and Apple would decide on what prices it would sell its products in Pakistan. So this is how the MNCs are controlling the freedom of a state actor. Then, students, two very good examples I have mentioned here. Amnesty International, which is a human rights non-governmental organization, and Greenpeace. These are the organizations that work for human rights, and environmental protection, respectively. Amnesty International is a non-governmental organization which works for human rights protection, and Greenpeace is an organization that works for environmental protection. Students, Amnesty International is an NGO, and it it works for the protection of human rights. And students, it is allowed to intervene in a state actor if it finds a human rights violation in a state. It would start protest, and it would hold the state accountable. It would bring such kind of matters to the attention of the international society, and it would protest against human rights violation. Well, here I'm not going to talk about that if it's right or if it's wrong. I'm not going to talk about this. We are just analyzing that how this nation-state system is being challenged. And this is another challenge to the nation-state system. Students, these organizations can dictate state actors today. The sovereignty of state actor is weakened now. Then students, another very hot topic of 21st century, which is climate crisis. Students, climate crisis is posing a challenge to the sovereignty of the state actor. Non-state actors such as international governmental organizations and NGOs, for example, Greenpeace, I've already mentioned its name. These organizations are exacting cooperation from state actors. States are now intervened and not allowed to exceed the limits of carbon emissions set by non-state actors. For example, United Nations and the non-governmental organizations that are concerned with the environmental protection, these organizations decide and set limits of carbon emissions, and states are not allowed to exceed the limits of carbon emissions. So this is how this new hot topic, that is climate crisis, this new crisis is posing a challenge to the sovereignty of the state actor. Students, that's all about the challenges to nation-state system. I hope everything is clear now. I hope I've explained everything in the best manner. Well, I tried to do this in the best manner. And this is the end of this lecture. Today we have covered nation-state system, which was a very important topic of international relations part 1 for CSS examination. And today we are done with this chapter. I hope that everything is clear now, and it is very easy for all of you to memorize these things now. We are ending this lecture here. In the next lecture, inshallah, we would start the second chapter of international relations part 1, that is about the theories of international relations, realism, liberalism, constructivism, and all these theories, and we would study those theories in detail. Students, second chapter is the most important chapter of international relations syllabus. I would try to explain that chapter in detail. So till then, thank you. Allah Hafiz. Don't forget to comment, like, share, and don't forget to subscribe the channel Knowledge Realm. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.